Well, as you've already heard, I am a pastor, and so to start things out properly, in conclusion. Now you understand what a pastor thinks. That means nothing at all. No, seriously, my name is Steve Grant, and I pastor Destiny Christian Center in the Greeley area. To give you a little bit of a summary of my background, my wife and I have been in ministry now for 30 plus years. Started out with my dad in the Denver area, who pastored there for 40 years. And then moved there. We planted 2 churches back in Indiana and lived back there for 11 years, and then came back to northern Colorado. We planted a church in Greeley in 2003. And so we have pastored Destiny Christian Center now for 14 years, and God's been gracious to us. It's been a good season. How many of you remember, and you can almost say where you were and what was going on when you started to hear about the attack yesterday, when you started to hear what was going on down in Orlando? How many of you, it's almost like there was a moment etched in time where you can say, wow, all of a sudden I heard about this, and it was like time stopped. One of those memories for me was on September 11th. Because on September 11th, I was pastoring back in Indiana. And as I was pastoring back in Indiana, all of a sudden one of my buddies called from the church and he said, Steve, you got to turn on the news. And so I turned on the news, and of course one of the towers had been hit. And then immediately following that, very shortly after that, one of the second towers was hit. They were both in flames. There were reports that the Pentagon was burning. But I had a connection to the whole situation because my parents, David and Nona Grant, who were pastors, were with David Barton in Washington, D.C., and they were on a tour of the White House when the towers were hit. So they were in the White House watching people run around with submachine guns and clearing things out and doing things. They had flown in, they didn't have a car, they were trapped in D.C. for 4 days before they were able to get out. And with all of that going on, we were finally able to bridge, make telephone communications, learned of the Islamic connections, the Muslim situations, and so forth. So inquiring minds want to know, and I wanted to know more about Islam. I had seen a video put out by the Southern Baptist Church called The Cross or the Crescent. And it was an informational video that contrasted Christianity versus Islam. And I was curious about that, but I wanted to know more about Islam myself. And so since I was in southeastern Indiana at that point in time, I decided to drive to a town in Indiana called Plainfield. Plainfield, Indiana. What's there? CARE is there, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I wanted to talk with them firsthand about what they believed and what they thought. So I walked into their lobby and I took some of their flyers and their brochures and started talking to them. An imam came out and started answering questions for me and gave me my first Quran, and we started talking about Islam. And one of the things that he said that was really earth-shaking to me is he said, this is just the beginning. He said, ultimately, Islam will fly their flag over your nation's capital. Islam will rule the United States of America. We are already doing this. It's already in place. And he was very matter of fact. He was very friendly. He was very nice, but he was very bold with his statements. And so that started me thinking, and I've been monitoring things since that point. And today I'm going to try and condense this presentation down then, because about 6 months ago, a group of us got together and started compiling some of the information you're about to see. Although the frame of reference is going to be Greeley and Weld County, as you will soon find out, it doesn't matter where you live. You might be in Fort Collins, you might be in Johnstown, you might be in a big city or a small town, but this will impact you and it will impact me ultimately because of how they work and how they maneuver in some of these local areas. So you might pay attention to some of this as we go on. So I'm going to be talking fast. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. I will try, and if I have an editorial comment or so forth, hopefully you'll catch that as being different from the facts and the data. The data that you're about to see is collected from a number of different sources, most of which is public information. And what we are trying to do is simply connect the dots and present this, and then also present, hopefully, some solutions and some things that can be done. A lot of times, our denial does this. Well, what can we do? And we go on to the next meeting, and we go on to the next group, and the next issue, and we essentially do nothing. What are we doing? We're actually braiding our own noose when we do nothing. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah.
And so we have to take care of some things, but in order to do some things, the first thing that we have to do is we have to step out of denial. I don't know if any of you have heard of Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Teaches on various tactics and issues and so forth. And one of the things that Dave says is our enemy is not these various factions, our greatest enemy is denial. And it starts with this statement, well, it won't happen to me. And then it says this, well, it won't happen here. Well, it won't happen to my friends. Well, if it happens, it won't be as bad as what they say it is. Ask the people in Orlando this morning what they think about those issues. Ask the people that have dealt with some of these issues what they think of those types of things. So we have to confront and combat some of those mindsets. One of the things that I will say to you this morning is this, that Islam looks at us. Islam looks at a Judeo-Christian nation through the framework and the filter of a Muslim ideology, which includes Sharia, Taqiyya, the Hadith, all these types of things. They look at us through that framework. We, on the other hand, look at Islam through a Christian framework. What is a Christian framework? It is mercy, it is grace, it is trust. It is all these types of things that our nation has been founded on. And so sometimes we actually have to set aside that Christian framework to understand how Islam operates. So we'll endeavor to do some of that today. Now, to quote the prophet Jack Webb, on Dragnet, the story you're about to see is true. There is nothing going on here that is under the surface that we shall soon see. But here are some of the issues that we are dealing with, and this is what got me going a few months ago. Although I've been involved in the fight for several years in this area, the recent Islamic Syrian crisis has created some concern. How many would agree with that?
Yes.
How many of you would like to know what types of refugees are entering into northern Colorado?
Yeah.
Who's involved in the refugee resettlement? Here's the big question. Is there a credible terror threat from Islam? Would you like to know if there's a credible terror threat here in northern Colorado?
Yes.
Okay, and then what should we do?
We need to know that.
Through that. Now here is some of the data from Greeley, and I'm just going to share this from a Greeley framework and from a Greeley standpoint. You may have to do some research and some homework in your area because you will discover that there are things happening under the surface. We have groups that will move into, for example, Cheyenne, Wyoming. They will move into Greeley, Colorado, and so forth. They will get their housing established, and once they get their housing and all their federal paperwork established, then what happens is they start to move to communities in this area and move into that area. I have a source that is in the Cheyenne area that says that among Muslims moving in, looking for Section 8 and subsidized housing in the Cheyenne area, in the last, I believe it's 5 years, I believe it's the last 5 years, would that be correct? In the last 5 years, how many applications from Muslims do you think came in to live in the Cheyenne area? Anybody here?
3,000.
3,000. It's higher.
10,000.
Huh?
10,000.
Higher.
30.
More than 30,000 applications in the last 5 years of Muslims to move into the Cheyenne area.
Applications for subsidized housing?
Yes, yes, sir. So, in the Greeley area, more than 1,000 Somali Muslims moved in 2006. I don't know if many of you remember when JBS had the raid and there were several undocumented illegals that moved out. Well, it just about closed the plant down. And at that point in time, JBS actually went to the Somali community in Minneapolis and said, you already have legal status. We don't have to worry about you being undocumented. You're just Muslims. So we'll move you to Colorado and you can set up shop there. And so things really started at that point in time. By 2013, this grew by 2,500 additional refugees at the minimum. These are minimum stats. This is minimum data at that point in time. And then annually right now, 300 to 1,000 refugees are relocated to northern Colorado through the Colorado Refugee Services Program. This is a state office under the governor, and CRSP will figure pretty heavily in what's going on because they will have an impact on you. So, would you agree with me that this in and of itself is going to strain local government, infrastructure, social programs, all the Section 8 things and so forth? What if you have an older person that needs Section 8 housing or subsidized housing? They're on a fixed income and so forth, and you have 300 to 1,000 people moving in, and the state just says, here they are, have a nice day. So there's a problem. These are some stats as of 2013. These have been corroborated by Steve Hall from District 6 and so forth. 335 refugee students attended well D6 schools in 2013. Now, if you were thinking about testing, if you were thinking about how your school system is going to look at the state level, whether or not they're going to get passing and failing grades, whether or not you have to remediate English and so forth, how many believe that this is going to pose a problem? 20,000 students, and you have 335 of them that you have to actually acclimate and adjust to the culture and the ways of education. 18 native languages spoken. 18 separate languages spoken within District 6. Translation services are required. So let's say that you do have somebody that moves in from a foreign area and so forth, and they have to interact with the driver's license branch, county clerk and recorder. They have to interact with your schools. They have to go to court. They have to deal with these types of things. By law, it is required that we provide them with translation services for all of these different areas. 18 languages, that's a little bit of a challenge. What do you think? In 2008 then, with this growing and emerging climate, there was something that started to happen. Some of the local leaders in Greeley said, we need to do something with some of these people, we need to help them out. So in 2008, the East African Community Center was opened up. And it was opened up to try and help these people to start to feel comfortable, to assimilate, and to reach out to them and so forth. And in 2011, due to the influx, this was actually renamed the Global Refugee Center in Greeley, Colorado. The president was Assad Abdi. Community outreach leader was Muhammad. Both are devout Muslims. And they started to spearhead and step in. And so support from this group started to be the local imams in Weld County, as well as Weld County government volunteers, because they start to build and they start to bring in a coalition of government and say, we need help with these types of things. We want to avail ourselves. We need to build bridges and so forth. And what it became is it didn't become a multicultural center. It became largely a soft Islamic center where Muslims were starting to use this for their own opportunities in the development of their agenda. In 2012, I was a part of this. I had two believers who had converted from Islam to Christianity, and they were secret believers, and they were still meeting in mosques. And they came to me in late 2011 and said, Steve, we are now getting to, Islam is now getting to a place, and there's discussion in mosques, that now Islam is going to start pushing softly for their own agenda. One of the things they're going to start pushing for is halal food. Muslims technically do not need halal food. They can eat what they call the food of the people of the book. They can eat anything that a Christian eats or a Jew eats, but they use halal food to try and push for an agenda. And the agenda is that they begin to push for their customs and their ways to come in to a certain area and alter the customs and traditions of an area. So they went to the University of Northern Colorado Food Services, and Food Services established a special halal food section in their main cafeteria. Today, if you walk into the main cafeteria at the UNC, you'll notice a nice area there that is all set up just for halal food. They have to have special utensils, they have to have special preparation materials, because no knife that touches non-halal food can touch halal food. You have to have separate cleaning, separate sterilization. All these things have to be done separately, and this is being implemented at UNC. They've also now provided space on campus for Islamic prayer 5 times a day. I'll speak to that more here in just one moment. When I went to them, and when I talked with them directly about this, I said, do you provide accommodations for Orthodox Jews? Do you provide accommodations for their dietary restrictions? Do you provide accommodations for Adventists? Do you provide accommodations for other religious beliefs? They said, no, we expect for them to purchase their food and prepare it themselves in their dorms or do some things separately themselves. So I said, this is what's happening, then you are tacitly endorsing Islam and you are elevating Islam, halal, and Sharia above other religions while professing multiculturalism. They didn't like that.
Have they done anything about it?
They have done nothing about that.
How can you push it, get them to do it?
Well,
Don't send your kids to university.
That's why you're here.
in 2016, that being this year, since January, the University of Northern Colorado has now added an Islamic prayer room. There have been no accommodations given to Christian groups at all. The room that is being added and has been added for Muslims is in McKee Hall. And it's one of the rooms where if you were to go with a group, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, whatever it might be, Campus Crusade, whatever the group might be, and you'd say, I want to book a room and I want to use it on a daily basis and so forth, they would say, great, you need to book that room, you need to fill out this commitment and all these forms and so forth. And oh, by the way, we'll work you in 2017 or 2018. But when the Muslims went to them, they just said, oh yeah, we need to do that, we need to accommodate you, opened up a daily room and gave it to the Muslims.
Why did they do that?
I think that's a question you need to ask them. Now these are the groups across the United States of America that oversee refugee resettlement. There are 9 resettlement contractors. All of these groups work with the United Nations. United Nations largely handles Islamic resettlement into the United States of America. Many of these are church groups, or should I say masquerade as church groups. The two we will be dealing with that work primarily in Northern Colorado are Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services and Catholic Charities, which operates under the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. So those are the two groups that we deal with here at a Colorado level in this region. Here they are. Lutheran Family Services. Lutheran Family Services has a budget as of 2012 in their annual report. They have a budget of $76 million annually. Out of that $76 million, notice the federal funding. Federal funding for Lutheran Family Services was $45 million in 2012.
Steve, is that for Colorado, for Greeley, or what?
That's national.
National.
Catholic Charities had a budget in 12 of $70 million. Their federal funding, take a look, how much? $69 million. So, is this a governmental agency or is this a charitable agency?
Where's the separation of church and state?
Well, we don't believe in those things when they work to our advantage. You can see how semantics are being played with and how these types of situations are working. So these things are going on under the table and such at the federal level, and they are filtering down to you and to me. And by the way, if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint, you can go hold of me afterwards and get some of this data, because there's a lot of information here that you may want. Now in 2016, Colorado Refugee Services Program plans to resettle 170 new refugees or refugee families in the Greeley Evans area. They are projected to be half Burmese Buddhist and half Somali Muslim. They said of these 170 that none would be settled into the surrounding communities. I got this data directly from Joe Wisman-Porter, who's a part of the CRSP state office. He and I met. And thanks to Mimi and a couple others actually organized a meeting and said, we want you to meet with this guy. We've worked with him before and we've done some things at the state level. Organized the meeting, and so we met in a small group meeting, and so this is directly from the state office. And he said, none will be settled in the surrounding communities. I said, well, will there any be in Loveland? He said, no. I said, Fort College? No. I said, what about Boulder? Boulder needs refugees. Don't you think that a charitable and tolerant place like Boulder needs some Muslims? He said, no. I said, why Greeley? He said, well, he said, you have the Global Refugee Center, you have JBS, you have these areas. And so we're going to send them there. I said, what is your criteria for settling people? He said, we just make the decision. In fact, I asked him, I said, what are your thoughts about settling Syrian Muslims in the future? He said, well, we have no plans at this point. I said, if you had plans, would you tell me? He said, no, I would not. I said, what would you do with Syrian Muslims and so forth if you were to bring them in? He said, what we would do is just make an arbitrary decision. He says, quite frankly, we thought about settling a Syrian community perhaps in Loveland or Fort Collins.
That's what we
Syrian
need.
community.
Who is this you're talking to?
Community. This is Joe Wisman Porter. He works at the state level with Colorado Refugee Services Program. He didn't tell me the Lutheran Family Services would be the primary vendor. Lutheran Family Services gets about $3,800 per head to do this, so they're paid rather well to do this.
And could you touch real briefly on why your numbers are from 2012 and not more current?
The reason my numbers are from 2012, 2013 is because that's when financial reports and auditing data are released, so they are behind the cycle. And they are what I was able to get a hold of earlier this year, so they are updated.
On the subsidization, I know that a year and a half ago, when my granddaughter was looking for a place to live, the rental prices in Greeley were about $100, $150 a month cheaper than they were in Loveland, Fort Collins area. On subsidizing these, do they just give them money, they find their own place to live, or how do they do that? Or are they in special housing? Or
Colorado Refugee Services Programs helps with their initial housing and helps them locate different places. Now,
One quick question. You keep saying refugees. Are these undocumented? Are they going through the process of becoming citizens? What's going on with them?
these people are documented, they have their work permits, they come in as refugee status, so they might be from Somalia, they might be from Burma, they might be from Syria, they might be from various other places where it has been targeted. One of the things I asked Joe, though, is I said this, I said, what is the religious mix of this group? And he said, I do not track religious mixture. I said, how many Christians do you have?
zero.
I said, I'm a pastor. I said, we have a responsibility as Christians to take care of our own. How many Christians are you bringing in? We're going to help them get settled in. We're going to assimilate them. We're going to take care of them and so forth. He said, I don't know, Ben. That was his statement to me. Now here's the issue. At the state level, CRSP conducts zero threat assessment. None. So, this is our state responsibility right now under Colorado Refugee Services Program. No threat assessment, zero. They offer no additional state funding to offset infrastructure burdens. So they provide nothing to the district for the schools. They provide nothing for social services. They provide nothing to the counties to administer food stamps or whatever. And they sign these people up for all of these government assistance programs. Zero money comes back with these people. So the state places these people arbitrarily at the state level, but does nothing to offset the cost or the burden at the local level. Number three, CRSP arbitrarily chooses cities, and I mean arbitrarily. They make the decision based on their practices and policies. Number four, CRSP does not seek to assimilate refugees, but to create communities of integration. So what they say is, well, Steve, it's a logical thing. If we have some people that are Muslim, Burmese or Somali or so forth, we want to make them feel comfortable. We want to make them feel loved. We want to make them feel welcomed here. So we're going to put them where we already have a small community emerging, and that's going to be in these areas. So they literally create areas like Little Burma, Little Mogadishu, and so forth. And once again, no Christian refugees are being admitted.
Has anyone brought up the fact that that's against federal law? It's called steering.
Well, of course it is.
How can they do that?
Yeah, because they don't.
I'll tell you how they do it. I'll tell you how they do it. They have a pen and a phone. See, one of the things
Obama
is
has
this,
that
one of
too.
the things that is going on
Yes, he does.
is the fact that, you see, the liberals are very willing to take authority and wield it, while we still ask permission to wield the authority we are delegated. They are willing to overstep their authority while we are willing to understep ours. So they will win ugly while we lose gracefully, and we've got to confront that advantage.
Does this interface anywhere with the United Nations Treaty with the United States called the Genocide Treaty?
I do not know. I do not know.
Sure smells like it.
Let me run on for just one moment.
What you are telling us seems to me a very clear message that we need to get Mr. Trump in the White House.
Republicans from local down to national.
These are the 3 Colorado cities that have been identified as potential resettlement centers for additional Syrian refugees. This is 2015 Department of State documents. Denver, Colorado Springs, Greeley. However, as Joe said, to me, we might want to put them in Loveland, we might want to put them elsewhere. Now, let me give you a couple of moments of background on some of this. In 1952, there was a man by the name of Syed Kutub. He was a devout Muslim and he attended the University of Northern Colorado. He hated it. He went to a church dance there, and of course, as a Muslim in his framework where women are clothed in burqas and so forth, he saw men and women dancing together, and some of these ladies had sleeveless dresses.
Ooh!
And their faces weren't covered, and so forth. And so he wrote very hate-filled statements, but then he returned to Egypt. He became one of the founders of Muslim Brotherhood. He hated Northern Colorado, and as such, his writings made Greeley in Northern Colorado a target for radical Islam, because one of the things is this: when they start to speak of an area, when they start to live in an area, they begin to say that area is hated, and so we see it as a place of potential conquest. This is why they wanted to set up a mosque right there where the World Trade Center was bombed. They said, we destroy it, we attack it, and now we rebuild it under our area and under our jurisdiction. This right here should be concerning to us in and of itself, but wait, there's more. In 1994, Anwar al-Awlaki graduated from CSU. He had a BS in civil engineering. He was the president of the Islamic Student Association at Colorado State University. He was the mentor of the Fort Hood killer.
Yes.
He presided over his funeral, and when he was killed in 2011, look at what he was. He was a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda. He was one of their leaders. So, there is a connection to Fort Collins, there is a connection to Greeley as potential targets of radical Islam. You catch that? Because what they start to do is they start to develop a foothold and then they seek to conquer that region. Now in November of 2015, the United States Department of Defense identified an ISIS cell. Location? Greeley and Fort Collins, Colorado. Somebody says, is terror a reality in Northern Colorado? The answer is yes. According to the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, there is an ISIS cell in Northern Colorado. They are trying to watch it and scout it at this point in time. I've verified this with a couple of people that I know in military. One is a retired general, and he has verified this as well and confirmed this to me. So, some of the military personnel that are in the church that I pastor have been advised to curtail certain activities. As soon as they get home from drills, they change into cities. They keep a low profile on Facebook. They don't talk anything about the military. They don't do these types of things. They try and keep their families in a low profile because of the fact that it is a verified, corroborated fact. ISIS is not coming to Northern Colorado. ISIS is here.
It's already on the webpage, by the way, that the mosque of Fort Collins is under surveillance.
Yes,
So it's a webpage of mosques which are under surveillance, and Fort Collins is on.
that's right. Yep.
That's already been issued nationally for our troops. Our son is in the National Guard Army, and he's been told that probably a year and a half ago.
That's right. So, here's another area that you may want to consider, and I was approached on this personally as a pastor firsthand. In 2013, there was a group that came in to northern Colorado. They're called the Evangelical Immigration Table, or the Table. And they wanted to say, you know, there has to be a pathway for some of these people that are already here. We need to talk about and dialogue about immigration and these types of situations. And they said, you know, the Lord loves the immigrant. And so I raised my hand at the meeting. I said, which ones? Well, the Lord loves all immigrants. I said, that's right. The Lord does love all immigrants, but He doesn't allow them to live wherever they want to. And I said, did you know that in Scripture there are 3 types of immigrant? Number 1, there is the legal immigrant. Number 2, there is the refugee that flees to a place temporarily and then returns back to their home. And number 3, there is the illegal immigrant that will not conform to the nation's standards and ways of life. And so they are then expelled from the nation. Which type of immigrant are we talking about here? You can imagine then that the people got a little bit upset in that room because I destroyed their agenda with actual accurate theology. Because once again, one of the battles that we are facing today is common core Christianity. God loves everybody, and so everybody needs to do whatever everybody wants because that's the way it is, and Jesus would have wanted it that way. If Jesus showed up today and got mad at people, they would tell Jesus to stop behaving like that and be a little more like Jesus should be. How many follow what I'm saying? But one of the things that Breitbart has done a very good job of, and other groups, is this, that they have chased down the evangelical immigration and documented their funding, and it's funded by George Soros through the Ford Foundation and the Tides Foundation. But that didn't stop key leaders from Greeley to travel to Cory Gardner's office and other offices in D.C. to lobby for a pathway to immigration and so forth, because after all, we're all God's children and this needs to be done. Here's one of the other things where that money went. It also helped to fund and build the Global Refugee Center in Greeley under the pretext of humanitarian service. So we talk about things like George Soros, we talk about things like refugee resettlement, we talk about these types of issues, and we do so at a macro level. But let me tell you this, my friends, it is happening in our communities right now, where your pastor, your church, your charitable giving, your humanitarian service, and all of this is being swayed by people like George Soros with his money trails, groups like the Evangelical Immigration Table, Colorado Refugee Services. All of these types of things are going on right now in our local communities, and we are being dumbed down and preconditioned to accept some of this. So, let's take a quick look and a quick tour of Greeley. Right downtown Greeley, there's a really nice little African restaurant that is open. It is called Najat. It is the Najat African restaurant. It's on 10th Street. Great place to eat. It's a wonderful place. The local mosque in Greeley just had an open house. Guess who catered it?
Yeah.
Najat. Because this is Muslim owned and operated, and by the way, they serve halal food. This is where they buy their food and some of their halal meats and things of that nature. This is A&F East African store. This is about 2 blocks away, just around the corner, and this is where Najat buys their food. I had a friend who took these pictures and sometimes would snap pictures and have to run because he was chased off of the area by people who were very angry that their stores were being photographed, and I thank God for it. If you will notice down here in the window of the A&F East African store in Halal Market, there is a flyer, and we blew it up, and it is for Imam Nawawi. Imam Nawawi is a radical extremist Muslim who preaches jihad against the United States of America, and he was to be the guest speaker at the local mosque in Greeley, and then he was going to go and be a guest speaker at the local mosque where? In Fort Collins. This is M&A Grocery, once again, just a couple blocks away from that. This here was the place that sold a whole bunch of cheap cell phones. Buy here, pay here cell phones, get it done, and people were flooding in here and buying a whole bunch of cell phones. This store came under surveillance, and 48 hours after it came under law enforcement surveillance, they closed down and disappeared.
My wife worked one case in Lexington, and the settlement was set up like that, and they laundered $72 million in 5 years in one of these places.
Through one of those old stores, that's exactly right. So there are money laundering operations as well for Islam, radical Islam, jihad. This here is a little building. There's a little realty shop in this, as well as a couple other offices here. This is at 10th Avenue and 13th Street. It's 2 blocks from the church I pastor, and the site where we gather. And this is a local mosque and madrasa. You will see the Arabic writing here that is in the window, down here by the door. And you go in, I've walked in while they are holding prayer services and so forth. But it's not just a mosque, it's also a madrasa. Madrasa is where they train children. And as I walked in, this was about 3 months ago, I was in this building and I peeked in to see what they were doing because they had glass windows. And the group that was gathered there was 50%, I would say, Arabic, Muslim, and 50% Hispanic. They are recruiting now into the Hispanic areas. They are starting to recruit in the jails and starting to do these types of things so that they can cross-pollinate. Here's some of the Muslim-owned businesses in Greeley. Winchell's Donuts. Doesn't that sound Muslim? It has now been purchased and it is owned by Muslims. The Conoco, just a few doors up at 8th Avenue and 16th Street, is Muslim-owned. Erickson's Florist, Muslim-owned. Cattleman Steakhouse, Muslim-owned. Alberto's Restaurant, Muslim-owned. All of these different things are being picked up and purchased by Muslims, and they're keeping the names so that you will not be aware that they are Islamic-owned, and that they are actually funneling money and moving money into Islamic activities and so forth.
Do they keep the same personnel?
Yes, they do. The ownership behind it many times will change, but the same personnel is at the front counters and such, because of the fact they don't want you to know what they are doing.
Is there a way we can get a list of those businesses?
Boy, I'd like to know. I really would. And this is where we've got to, this is where I believe that we've got to start going into local businesses and saying, hey, who owns you? Who's your owner? What's your business? I'd like to meet them. I'm a business person myself. I want to meet your owner. Can I meet them?
And boycott them.
Yes.
And then you start to develop, and we start to develop a network of, hey, who's in, who's out, what's going on behind the scenes, and we start to know what's going on in our cities and in our businesses.
I have a statement and 2 questions. The statement being, I saw on Fox News, they interviewed a Muslim leader at a church and asked how many radical Muslims within the communities of the United States and the churches. That was 70%.
That's
vetted
right.
by their own.
That's right.
The question would be, have you been to a Democratic group and made this presentation, and what was the response if you did?
I have not, because I've not been welcome. I'm too Republican, probably. I'm a precinct committee person myself in the Republican Party, so they probably don't like me.
Follow up on my previous comment, and that is Hillary is beholden to Saudi Arabia through the money they've given to
Yes.
their foundation, and to other Muslim countries who she's gathered money from for her foundation. So I would suggest she would want to accelerate this program.
I would agree. Now, this is where the local mosque is in Greeley. It's the old Roma restaurant. It's on the southeast corner of 8th Avenue and 16th Street. Great pizza. They have a mosque in the building. And the main entrance is here on the front of the building, but if you go over here to the side entrance on 8th Avenue, you will notice this little sign here that says, women's entrance only.
That's real, Aaron.
They are already quietly implementing in their micro communities set up by the state Sharia. They are not asking permission to do it. They are merely exercising what they believe is their religious right to do it. And this is Greeley, Colorado. The local imam here has 2 wives. Flouts it. It's well documented. He's like, yeah, I have 2 wives. That's my Muslim right. Nobody challenges him on the basis of law. Not one person challenges it because of this. We are looking at things through a live and let live perspective. This here is a Sharia-compliant clothing store now on 8th Avenue and 14th Street. And right around the corner is a halal meat and groceries, and they have Sharia-compliant clothing. Hanging right here in the window are little burqas for little girls. So this is a site that is under development. It's a beautiful piece of property and so forth. I have talked to a man who knows the owner, and they're trying to develop it out for retail, but this site is now being surrounded by little Islamic-owned micro-businesses and so forth. What do you think he's going to be able to do with his property?
Sell it to Muslim.
This is the downtown Greeley development district and so forth. 8th Avenue runs like a rib right down through this. This is 8th Avenue here in Greeley is currently redeveloping it and doing a wonderful job and so forth. But do you know who is populating that area with little micro businesses? It's largely Islam, because Islamic businesses are getting small business loans from the government. They're legal. They have their green cards. They have status here. So they go to the government and they get all the different things with small business and such, and they are starting to develop a micro community. And they are doing it here. Their next target, by the way, according to what I've heard with some of the Muslims, is they are looking at either Loveland or Fort Collins, perhaps Fort Collins to start to target next, since they've already got a mosque established. This is an apartment that they call Little Mogadishu in the Greeley area. It is filled with Muslims, mostly from Somalia. This here is the location of Greeley's newest prayer room. This is McKee Center, and McKee Hall now has an Islamic prayer room where Muslims meet and pray 5 times a day. This I shot a photo of in the library, Missioner Library, and you can see this book for sale because it was also being used as curriculum. Revolutionary Iran, a history of the Islamic Republic. So this is what is being sold and marketed in northern Colorado. And in Fort Collins, in response to Anwar al-Awlaki's prayers and desires, now there is a new Islamic mosque and prayer center there. Now, let me tell you how Islam works. There's a book out called Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam by Dr. Peter Hammond. And he says as long as Muslims are 1% or less of the population, they say, we're a peace-loving people. We love America. We're just happy to be here. We don't have to fight with everybody like we do in other nations. When they get to 2 to 3%, they start cross-letting. They start going into the jails. They start hitting minorities, street gangs. They start targeting groups and so forth, and they start growing. Now, part of the reason that they're going to grow here in northern Colorado is by proselyting some of these groups, or by immigration with the state bringing them in. When they get to 5%, then they begin to exercise their influence in a local area. They'll pick a college, they'll pick a city, they'll pick a region, and they'll say, we want halal food. Just don't leave us, just leave us alone in this area. We'll police ourselves. You police don't have to come in so much. It's okay. We know our customs. We know our life. You don't know our people like we know our people. Just let us take care of ourselves here, and we'll work that out. It's a cultural exchange, and they start working like this.
From a policing perspective, I can tell you that does not work.
It does not work at all. For your information, by the way, this is one of the good guys and a dear friend of mine. Doug Burdett pastors Morning Star Church in Red Feather, and he also had, what, 18 years? 13 years in law enforcement himself, and those backgrounds before disability moved him out of that. So Doug speaks firsthand to this, and he knows what he's talking about. Now, as things go up from 5%, they will push for an enclave of self-government, as I mentioned. Then they go to 10%, and that's when the riots, the threats, the offendedness, I'm mad because you drew a cartoon, all those types of things start moving. And then at 20%, of course, it starts moving upward from there. And this is what we are seeing, by the way, in areas of Detroit, Michigan. My daughter's a flight attendant. One of my daughters, she flew in and had to stay overnight in Detroit. And had to spend the night there in a suburb. And this was really not a strong Islamic enclave of Detroit. And she woke up the next morning with the call to prayer being sounded from the minarets in the area, blanketing the area.
Now, first question, how much did you pay Hans to be your warm-up?
It's not for sale.
But my question relates to Hans' country of origin as, in addition to my Higgenberg background, because I can't ever remember being asked if I was a Lutheran or Presbyterian. because there's nothing Lutheran or Presbyterian related to Hilton Bear. So my question is, as an initial bargaining statement in terms of addressing this, have you and others considered saying, well, let's reopen the old prison camp in World War II and put all of these Muslims who are from Syria, Mogadishu, etc., in there until we can vet them properly?
Well, I personally believe that Islam is not just religion. If you understand how they use mosque is not their religious place for prayer. Mosque is the center point of their government. And it's a training center. They keep weapons there. They do various things inside the mosque because you are not welcome to mosque. They will only allow you in for public sessions. They will not allow you in for their private prayer times. And furthermore, you don't speak Arabic. And a lot of their prayers and things are in Arabic, and then they issue their statements, their fatwas, they do this in a mosque. That's why it's so critical that if you've got a mosque under development in your town or somebody considering, you stop that mosque. Fort Morgan has a large enclave of Muslims that want to buy property and build a mosque, and so far nobody will sell to them to allow them to buy a mosque. The Muslims don't like it, but they don't have an anchor point for beginning.
It sounds like they're not trying to integrate, they're not trying to...
They don't want to integrate.
No interest in integrating.
That's exactly right, Sam.
Why do you think that when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, why do you think we weren't allowed to have a mosque in the first place? Because that's the same thing for them.
They see that as a government center. You're exactly right, Sam. I agree.
You can even be more. I mean, it's the most in history where always center of power to spread the Islam.
I
And
agree.
people here, they think a mosque is like a church. It's not like a church.
It's not. And Michael McCune from Cheyenne, you've heard him lecture on economics, but another one of his strengths is the fact that he, like Hans, has also studied through the Quran. And I agree with his statement that we need to register every Muslim as a registered foreign agent. And we need to track them as such the way we would do a hostile nation to the United States of America. You can see what happens then in the stages of Muslim domination. For the sake of time, since you've been so kind, I think we need to start talking about what we need to do and what needs to be on our agenda. Number one, I think every city council needs to see this PowerPoint. What do you think?
Yeah.
How many think your city council needs to see this PowerPoint? Now, in order to do that, it may take you. And so you need to take this to your city leaders, to your county government officials, and so forth. We need to start dealing with employers such as JBS and saying, you are looking for cheap labor, but you're actually fomenting terror. And they will come back at you and they will say there is not a problem. Some of you noticed a letter that was released through a friend of mine, and it's on some of your tables today and so forth, dealing with Mayor Tom Norton. Mayor Tom Norton in Greeley, his wife Kay is of course the head of the University of North Colorado. Tom Norton runs Greeley, and he actually shut down a question the other day in a political meeting and says, there's no problem. We've had our conversations, don't bring this up again. There's no problem with Islam in Greeley. I think that he needs to be made to feel heat. Now, we need to start issuing our demands. What would happen today if every Republican, if every conservative, if every Christian were to start saying, you've listened to Islam, it's our turn now. These are our demands. When we started saying some things and demanding some things, do you think that they would start to feel some heat?
Yeah.
Here's one of the number one demands. We need to say security issues have to be considered. They have to be considered. Here's a quote from FBI Director James Comey. Syrian refugees entering the U.S. cannot be screened adequately for terror threats. And I think today Orlando would agree with that. What do you think? Yes, sir.
What you're saying is the reason my organization exists. What you're saying is we demand this, and that's true. But what are we going to do to back it up when they say, we don't care what you demand, you can't do anything about it?
Well,
which is exactly what Joe said to you.
Exactly.
Basically, is what he was saying.
And so we've got to take step one before we can take step two.
Yeah, well, you have to be able to say, And if you don't, we have the right as citizens to do something about it.
Yes, Sarah?
I got an email from Tony Frank that he sent to all students, and it's asking us to stand in solidarity with our Islamic and Middle Eastern immigrant communities on our campus, instead of scapegoating them for the tragedies of like Orlando.
I think they deserve to go.
Yeah, I totally agree.
We need to call a spade, and when they have a doctrine called taqiyya, where they are enabled to lie, I think we need to say, we will consider you with complete suspicion until you repent of your ways of taqiyya, and you are able to repudiate that across the board with regard to Islam. Until then, we are going to profile you, and any Muslim is considered worthy of suspicion.
Did he send out an email saying for the campus to stand by every Christian? Because that's who they're blaming us on. They're saying that Christians created the environment.
That's right.
That's
That's right. And once again, I'll try and wrap up here in a few minutes. I know it's been a little longer than normal. I
Can
apologize.
tell you something about your article. I went to the meeting which was organized by the League of Women Voters. I call them the League of Women Writers because they don't respect the First Amendment. And when I asked the question, they said, sit down, it is disrespectful. What is it?
It's okay.
Too much.
They said sit down.
Disrespectful, yeah, and unbelievable, I couldn't speak.
Here's one of the key issues. Ronald Reagan in 1977 issued a profound statement. It was this: our job is not to make Congress see the light, but to feel the heat. One of the things that you will run into in government is this: people will say, well, I'm hamstrung. So you'll run into a county leader and they will say, well, my edicts come from the state, there's nothing I can do. You'll go to the state, and the state will say, well, I just have one vote. I'm a House representative member, or I'm this. There's nothing I can do. You will talk to a representative of the House and Senate, and they will say, well, Steve, my power is limited. No, your power is not limited. That is a lie, and we must do what we must do. Because the thing that I want to bring into everybody's attention is this: the number one object of government, federal, state, local, is the security of our nation. And if you abdicate that responsibility, this is a security issue at every level. Now, with that then, locate sponsors for ALAC. ALAC is American Laws for American Courts. We need to have this passed at the federal level. We need to have it passed at the state level. Last week, Senator John Cook here at the state level said that he would be willing in 2017 to carry that legislation. I believe Senator Lundberg needs to also co-sponsor that legislation. I believe that we need to get our representatives going, and I believe that we need ALAC in the state of Colorado. There's going to be people that are just going to say you're racist, you're intolerant, you're homophobic, you're Islamophobic, you're whatever. I believe that we need to say, look, you can call me every name you want. I'm standing for our land. I'm standing for our liberty. Shut up and pass it. It's time. Second, we need to start pushing for America-centric, Judeo-Christian leaning curriculum in schools. It cannot be done. Oh, it can absolutely be done. There's a group called the American Center for Bible Curriculum in Public Schools. Their curriculum has now been accepted by 2 schools in Weld County. One of the charter schools and one of the rural districts has accepted. It is all vetted through the United States Supreme Court. It is completely legitimate. Why is this important? I'll tell you why this is important. Let me ask you a couple questions. How many members are on a federal grand jury?
Well, 16 on federal.
23.
Well, 16 to 23.
Yeah. You know why the original is 23? Because that was the number of the Sanhedrin in the governing body of the tribes of Israel. How long is a bankruptcy allowed on your records and left on your records? 7 years. Why? It is because of the biblical law of release pertaining to the economic cycles. Why is it that we have 3 branches of government in the United States government? It's because of Isaiah 33, where it says God is our judge, God is our lawgiver, God is our king, he will save us. That's divided up: judge, judicial branch; lawgiver, that's the legislative branch; king, that's the executive branch. Our founders did this. Do you know that there are 35% of our founding fathers' direct quotes came directly from the Bible itself? And yet we don't want to teach this and cause people to assimilate in our school system when it's completely legal and completely legitimate. It's time that we stand up and reinsert this and let the name calling begin, because we've got to take a stand.
You sound like really important.
The other thing we need to do, one of the things we can start doing is enforcing laws at the local level for domestic violence, public intoxication, and so forth. Why do we do this? Because if they have a culture of spousal abuse, if they have a culture of intoxication, if they have a culture of violent behavior, we need to start to get their name out in front of law enforcement.
That's why they don't want you in their area. That's part of why they want that group. They want to beat the crap out of their wives.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
What's the repercussions you felt preaching this sermon from the pulpit?
I'll deal with that in just a minute. Legislation. Here's one of the other things. All this is being dealt with by unfunded mandates. They give you the refugee and they don't give you the money.
Right.
But if we don't do something, this is what's going to happen. Terror attack on an oil rig. The slaughter of children in a school.
That's coming.
A lone gunman walking into a church.
We've already had that.
I've started doing this, and 3 weeks ago at the church I pastored, or what was it, 4 weeks ago? Dusty, you came to it and you reported it. There's a Muslim guy that pulls up in front of the church that I pastor and walks around his door and opens up his trunk. Dusty and a couple others walk out to the sidewalk, and he sees them and he takes a look and he closes his trunk and he gets back into the car and he drives away. We don't know what he had in his trunk. We don't know what we were doing. We don't know if it was a test. We don't know how serious it was.
How did you know he was a Muslim?
Or in the Muslim community. And we happen to know him from the area.
All right, now you know him, okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So here's the situation, and I'm going to say this very honestly. As a Christian and as a pastor, I don't need this fight. I've lived my life trying to save the souls of individuals. And I've lived my life preaching the goodness of Jesus Christ. And I've lived my life seeing people rescued from all sorts of problems and trauma, bruises of the past, all those types of things. But today we're in a war for the soul of our nation. We've got to save America. And every nation is built on a moral framework. This is why the Islamic Republic of Iran is under Sharia. This is why, if you see the Free Tibet bumper stickers, they don't want to free themselves from Marxism. All they want is they want a Buddhist framework for their Marxism. That's what Free Tibet is all about. We have some choices we've got to make. Are we going to be one nation under one God? Is Jesus? I'm not saying everybody has to become a Christian. I'm not saying everybody has to be the same group or denomination. I'm not saying that at all, but there's got to be a common moral framework to help you live it. So it can be stopped, and it can be stopped if we take step one. People need to know it. I've got a question for you. How many of you would be willing to take this presentation and take it to somebody and share it? That is going to be the key start, and then we'll have to take it from there and see what happens. All right, I thank you for your time. Any questions?